Supreme Court keeps Title 42 policy in effect for time being. Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy reports the latest on the Supreme Court's decision to allow Title 42 to remain for now on special report. Supreme Court Justices Neil Gorsuch and Ketanji Brown Jackson made an unlikely team on Tuesday by issuing a dissent against the majority's opinion to indefinitely keep Title 42 in place while the High Court considers an argument from 19 mostly Republican-led states. Those states challenged a district court's ruling last month that would vacate Title 42, which was enacted by the Trump administration in March 2020 to allow officials to expel migrants on public health grounds. Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, wrote the dissent and was joined by Jackson, who President Joe Biden nominated earlier this year. Supreme Court temporarily halts termination of Title 42, will hear case in February. The two justices argued that the Biden administration and Congress have failed to adequately address the immigration crisis that is likely coming after Title 42 is vacated, but they wrote that it is not the Supreme Court's job to issue policies where elected leaders fail. Justice Neil Gorsuch joined the Supreme Court in 2017. Justice Neil Gorsuch joined the Supreme Court in 2017. Reuters/Jonathan Ernst/file. The only means left to mitigate the crisis, the states suggest, is an order from this court directing the federal government to continue its COVID-era Title 42 policies as long as possible at the very least during the pendency of our review, Gorsuch wrote. For my part, I do not discount the state's concerns. Even the federal government acknowledges that the end of the Title 42 orders will likely have disruptive consequences, he continued in the dissent. But the current border crisis is not a COVID crisis. And courts should not be in the business of perpetuating administrative edicts designed for one emergency only because elected officials have failed to address a different emergency. We are a court of law, not policymakers of last resort. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, accompanied by Vice President Kamala Harris, speaks during an event on the South Lawn of the White House in Washington, Friday, April 8, 2022. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, accompanied by Vice President Kamala Harris, speaks during an event on the South Lawn of the White House in Washington, Friday, April 8, 2022. AP photo/Andrew Harnack. Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan said they would also deny the application but did not sign on to Gorsuch's dissent. Title 42's expected end spells chaos in courtrooms. The other five justices John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett and Clarence Thomas agreed to hear the challenge from the states during the February 2023 argument session. Republicans and some Democrats have harshly criticized the Biden administration for failing to prepare adequately for the end of Title 42. Immigrants bundle up against the cold after spending the night camped alongside the U.S. Mexico border fence on December 22, 2022, in El Paso, Texas. Immigrants bundle up against the cold after spending the night camped alongside the U.S. Mexico border fence on December 22, 2022, in El Paso, Texas. John Moore/Getty Images. Texas Gov. Greg Abbott, who has been busing migrants from border communities to cities in the Northeast, wrote in a letter to Biden last week that the terrible crisis at the border is a catastrophe of your own making. The need to address this crisis is not the job of border states like Texas, Abbott wrote on December 20. Instead, the U.S. Constitution dictates that it is your job, Mr. President, to defend the borders of our country, regulate our nation's immigration, and manage those who seek refuge here. Southern border in limbo as Title 42 hangs in balance after temporary Supreme Court stay. As Gorsuch noted, even the federal government admits that ending the policy could exacerbate an already untenable border crisis. The government in no way seeks to minimize the seriousness of that problem, the Department of Justice wrote in opposition to the stay on Title 42 last week. Immigrants line up next to the U.S. Mexico border fence after spending the night outside on December 22, 2022, in El Paso, Texas. Immigrants line up next to the U.S. Mexico border fence after spending the night outside on December 22, 2022, in El Paso, Texas. John Moore/Getty Images. The Biden administration, meanwhile, said Tuesday that it will comply with the order while it prepares for the end of Title 42. "We are advancing our preparations to manage the border in a secure, orderly, and humane way when Title 42 eventually lifts, and will continue expanding legal pathways for immigration," White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said in a statement. Paul Best is a breaking news reporter for Fox News Digital and Fox Business. Story tips and ideas can be sent to paul.best@fox.com and on Twitter @KincaidBest.